Welcome back to our Wednesday night Bible study. I've been missing being able to follow along with you on Wednesday evenings. As you know, we've started back on campus with some of our groups meeting, and I'm meeting with a group of young men that are praying for our church every Wednesday night, praying for our families, praying for our children and youth ministries, and it's a very, very sweet time. But I've enjoyed this, and I go back later and watch what you watched, just so that if there are questions, I'd be able to be caught up and kept up to date. Tonight I want us to continue our study in Titus. You know, we went from 1 Timothy to Titus because that puts them more in chronological order. 1 Timothy was written first, then Titus, and then 2 Timothy actually was the Apostle Paul's swan song. It's his last words that we have written, and so we'll get to 2 Timothy at some point. But tonight I want us to just continue our study of 1 Timothy, and in particular tonight, Paul does with Titus what he did with Timothy in giving him the instruction of appointing elders and then giving the qualification for elders. Their work's going to be the same, but they do it in different ways. And Paul actually addresses the appointing of these elders in a little bit different light. I think the reason for that the reasons are probably many. Certainly, part of it had to do with the differences between the church at Ephesus, where Timothy was the pastor, and the church at Crete, where Titus is the pastor. It also had to do with their personalities. Both Titus and Timothy had unique personalities, as does every preacher and every minister, and probably the way that they were addressed and the responsibilities that they were given in carrying out the assignment would be a little bit different. The circumstances certainly were. The church at Crete was a relatively new first generation of believers, and they were a little rougher around the edges. The church at Ephesus, where Timothy was given the assignment to preach, the church at Ephesus was much more polished. They had, as I think I may have mentioned to you, a who's who among pastors that had served there. It was a well-oiled machine, and Timothy more or less was just asked to make small corrections around the edges so that it continued to accomplish its purpose. But the church at Crete had some more challenging things to deal with. But Titus was also more equipped, it seemed. Maybe he had a little thicker skin, probably, and that positioned him to be a useful tool in God's hands. So tonight we're going to begin in verse 5, and verse 5 gives us a reminder of the reason that he is there. The Bible says in verse 5, Titus chapter 1, verse 5, "The reason I left you in Crete was to set right what was left undone, and as I directed you to appoint elders in every town." The reason that Titus is there is that the church in its infancy is beginning to get situated. It's trying to learn its way. The wording in the statement provides us some level of proof that Paul had been there with Titus in the beginning. If you can remember back to the book of Acts, there was an occasion where Paul was on a ship headed for Rome. It was doomed under the weather. It would not meet its destination, and there would be a shipwreck. But there was one occasion where the ship, under Paul's recommendation, should have landed in Crete, but instead the decision was made to sort of bypass Crete, and later the ship would be wrecked and land on another island called Malta. Crete is an island. It's only about 30 miles wide, but it is an island about 140 miles north and south in the Mediterranean Sea. And as the ship would try to navigate that western edge, it got caught in the storm, wound up shipwrecked, and the passengers and the crew wound up on Malta. But the fact that that Paul had an intent to be there, and the fact that he returned to that place at some point gave us some impression that he was instrumental in getting the gospel there. And many believe Titus was a resident of Crete and was saved under Paul's teaching, under Paul's ministry. And apparently Paul recognized a gift or giftedness and a call to ministry, which is why then he appointed Titus to appoint elders. The word that he used, the word left, he was left there. The reason I left you in Crete, that Greek word is katalipo, and it is a word that it's sort of peculiar because it means more than being left. It means temporary. This is a temporary assignment. It appears that Paul never intended for Titus to be the permanent bishop of the church at Crete. And as a matter of fact, later on, Titus is with Timothy on his final missionary. Titus is with Paul on his final missionary journey. But he has a purpose, and the purpose is that he is to set in order that which is undone. And by doing that, he is, in essence, that word was a medical term that had to do with a doctor setting a bone. I've broken both my arms at different times, but I had to go to the doctor, and they set my arm, put a cast on it so that it would heal properly. And that's the word that Paul uses to challenge Titus to set things right at Crete, set what is broken so that it could be properly healed. Titus was the perfect one for such an assignment because of his spiritual and emotional strength. Part of the process of appointing elders in these communities was to appoint elders that have outstanding character. As a matter of fact, beginning in verse 6, Titus again lists the characteristics and qualifications of an elder. He says, if someone who is blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of wildness or rebellion, for an overseer as God's manager must be blameless, not arrogant, not quick-tempered, not addicted to wine, not a bully, not greedy for money, but hospitable, loving what is good, sensible, righteous, holy, self-controlled, holding to the faithful message as taught, so that he will be able to both encourage with sound teaching and to refute those who contradict it. Today, there are two common understandings of the title elder. The Greek word is presbyteros, and it has to do with the oversight of an assembly. It is one of three words used to describe what we would call the office of the one responsible to lead the church. That question comes up from time to time. Are these three words used to describe one office, or are these three words to describe three separate offices? The word elder, which means overseer, the word bishop, which is a synonym to some level, but includes the idea of teaching, and the word for shepherd, which is the word we call pastor. Those who believe that these are three roles in one person point to this text in Titus, and they do that as proof that it can be more than one, but it's not necessarily more than one. The more reformed a church is, the more it will lean toward multiple people in these multiple positions. The more traditional Baptist role is there's really only two New Testament offices. The office of pastor, which is a compilation of elder, presbyteros, bishop, and the word for shepherd. In many of those churches, the deacons, undesigned, just over time, it's the way that it's worked out, assume the role of elder even if they don't hold the title. The Bible goes on to say there are certain characteristics that ought to be present in a person who holds these offices. The word blameless means that they have a strong character, not always finding themselves facing the accusations of misdeeds. Husband, always an adult male. of one wife, married to one female, and being faithful to her, faithful to one another. Children who are obedient, they're not perfect, but they each have an understanding. Every child has his own will, but it's important for the child of an elder to know right or wrong. That doesn't mean they always make the right choices, but that they know right from wrong. They're not to be arrogant, not given to aggression. That means they don't have to repeatedly be reminded not to be angry. Not prone to alcohol, not greedy, not a bully. Instead, then a list of the positive sides given to hospitality, being sensible, not lacking a sense of humor, but just not being silly, being sensible, being self-controlled, being driven by desire for holiness. In essence, an elder needs to see Christ as his ultimate example, and as his example, striving to be more and more like Christ. When that is the case, then his lifestyle becomes an illustration of the truth of Scripture. Remember, I think last week we talked a little bit about Crete, maybe the week before, a little bit about the reputation of the Cretans. They were a rambunctious crowd. They were given to a lot of worldly things, but the Christian leader needed to set an example. And when that example is set, then the teachings become validated and not easily refuted. It is a command to let one's walk prove their talk. We hear the colloquialism here, walk the walk, talk the talk. Well, that in a sense is what Paul is addressing for Titus. We need the kingdom needs your walk to match your talk. It validates the message. Nothing, and I think this is still true today, nothing weakens the gospel quicker than a leader who is giving a poor example of transformation, especially those who are in ministry. The life of a pastor, I equate it to this, and it's not original with me. I don't know where it originated, but the church, see the church as a forest, and there are all of us are imperfect. But when a tree falls, it falls. A small tree falls in a forest, and there's damage. But when the big tree in the middle of the forest falls, then there's often collateral damage where other trees are damaged by the fall. And that's what happens in the church. It's so pivotal, so paramount for the pastor to maintain his moral integrity so that the message is validated and that he doesn't cause damage to the kingdom, doesn't cause damage to the church. As we said in here this morning, this afternoon, I think about all of the people who gather here and what happens when one falls. It influences all of us, but when a leader falls, it's dominoes, and those that are weak in the faith seem to fall as well. So Paul very aptly is addressing the need for Titus and for others who are appointed to this leadership role to have a high moral standard and high moral integrity. Well, we'll pick up there next week. I'm glad that you have joined us this week, and I look forward to the next several weeks as we finish Titus. Have a great evening and have a blessed week.